It's the week ending Friday, the 6th of June, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen Ukraine launching an audacious and devastating drone attack deep inside Russia, the UK government promising to extend free school meals to any child in England whose parents receive universal credit, and gamers queuing late into the night to get their hands on Nintendo's newest console. You can read all you need to know about everything that matters in The Week magazine, but we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And joining me this week from the Week's digital team is Jamie Timson and Harriet Marsden, and from the Week Junior, senior editor Felicity Capon. The dream team, you might say. Good, because if you're the audience who thinks that, you'll be pleased to know that these three are in fact going to be my regular weekly panellists on the show from now onwards. How does it feel, team?
Woo! Oh, yeah.
I'm really excited. I don't know how the listeners are going to feel about it, but you thought you'd be rid of me.
I think we need to get a big sack so that people can send their fan mail through in the old style.
A P.O. box, like the old days. Yeah.
Felicity's just overwhelmed. Jamie, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This week we found out it may be a case of buy now, pay later.
Buy now, pay later customers are the perfect kind of customers. According to industry data, they are much younger than formal credit card users, spend more impulsively, and have purchasing power thanks to being able to split up their payments. A report published by the Harvard Business Review found that after consumers started using buy now, pay later services, they were 17 to 26% more likely to make a purchase. Not only that, but their average purchase was 10% larger than it was with normal payment methods, leading to an overall increase of 30% in discretionary spending.
Buy now, default later, a video posted by How Money Works on YouTube on Friday last week. Jamie, what's the story?
This week, Zilch and Klarna, who are two buy now, pay later companies, announced that they are actually introducing physical cards. Ollie, I don't know how much you know about buy now, pay later. Have you ever done it? Have you ever used a buy now, pay later company?
I haven't used the ones where you have to pay interest up front, but I have done the thing where you're like buying a telly from Currys and they give you a 0% plan for a year.
Yeah.
And I will never do it again. Because even though I paid in full after the year, I didn't stop the junk mail for years afterwards because they obviously just assumed as a result that I was someone who needed credit. And I thought, you are grooming me and this feels weird.
Mm-hmm. The companies make a kind of relatively straightforward case. So Zilch and Klarna are two of the bigger ones. You might have seen Zilch. Zilch have been advertising massively in London, big green ads with Zilch. It's quite a straightforward thing. Really, it's basically spreading out the cost of a purchase into smaller, more manageable payments. They've been targeting Gen Z. I'm not Gen Z, but I have used buy now, pay later. Their argument is that it gives more financial freedom to people who want to purchase goods because you decide when you pay for it. Obviously, the downsides or potential worries are that it is a form of credit. Currently, it's also unregulated. The buy now, pay later companies in the UK have less strict regulation in terms of credit checks and who can access this form of credit. 2 weeks ago, the government announced that wasn't going to be the case, and next year they're going to put in place some stricter regulation that gives kind of makes it more like getting a credit card than what is currently the case.
Something you can just click on a website and it makes it almost too easy, yeah. But Harriet, what's interesting about this is it's not just about buying big ticket items like my telly or a refrigerator or, a dining table, the sort of stuff it used to be in the old days. This is now, people are using buy now, pay later companies, as I understand, to like order pizzas and drinks and stuff on Deliveroo.
Yeah, so this is where I think it's really interesting that the buy now, pay later model has already become like the first choice for a lot of young consumers. On things like ASOS, for example, it's a very prominent option to split the cost over 3 payments, for example. And PayPal offers something similar, and it's so easy and it's right there in your face. And it's almost like, why would you not mitigate those kinds of payments, especially given the overwhelming pressure on people's finances at the moment? But just one study really, really, really jumped out at me, and the numbers are absolutely incredible. This is a 2025 study of users of these buy now, pay later things. almost half of all millennials have used these payment plans compared with just 21% from other generations. But 21% is still, it's a lot. We're not talking about a niche mode of payment here. We're talking about something that's effectively gone mainstream.
Yes, well, going mainstream is really interesting, isn't it, Felicity? And this is the thing, it's because it's presented to you as an option that a lot of people think about it at all. When you're buying a low-priced item, it might not occur to you to do BNPL, except it's being put forward. And that's Jamie's point, isn't it? It's being mainstreamed by a physical credit card.
And I think this is part of the reason why it's had accusations of being manipulative, is that it's so sort of seamlessly embedded in how you shop now. It's sort of a very inoffensive little Klarna button pops up that's just sort of ubiquitous now. And I think the way it's been marketed, it's got, Snoop Dogg is a backer, and I think Klarna got in. For Klarna, Snoop Dogg is a backer. I think they got into trouble a while ago for sending out marketing emails to people that weren't even supposed to be on their marketing list, which was encouraging people to buy clothing, buy new clothes using Klarna. For all their sort of putting their hands in the air and saying that they're just helping people have more financial freedom, they are really pushing people into making purchases of things that they don't necessarily need. And I think the demographic that they're targeting is very interesting, because there's been a lot of talk about young people are now saddled with debt, and they just live with debt as if that's a totally normal thing. They're far less prudent. They live in the now. And in some ways, you can't really blame them, because it's a generation that's followed a recession, a global pandemic, student loan debt. Many things are out of reach for them. The idea of owning a house, that sort of thing, is out of reach for them. And I think that's compounded also by, living in a time of sort of social media telling you should have this, this and this, and the idea of instant gratification and impulse buying and having all the clothes and having the fancy holidays and seeing people on social media.
It's not just consumerism, though. There's also a lot of reports out there that indicate that people are using buy now, pay later situations in terms of actually just affording to live. Like, we're talking also about people that are using these for like groceries. So this isn't just a story of like, oh, entitled millennials want their avocados and they want them now, but they don't want to pay for them now. Like, this is also an affordability issue, and the extreme normalization of debt is also a reflection of the economic reality that we find ourselves in.
Okay, so what is the issue with that, Jamie? Let's just really underline this. Harriet was saying earlier, why wouldn't you click the option? Let's just be clear. Why wouldn't you click the option? What are the dangers?
Yeah, so the big difference between buy now, pay later as it exists, or these companies now, and something like Wonga, say, is that buy now, pay later have often deals with retailers that basically give you, if you pay over, say, 3 months, or sometimes it's 4 months, the price of the product doesn't change. So you're not paying interest, and it's interest-free. And that's a big difference between Wonga, which obviously ramped up the interest.
They were a payday loan company.
They were a payday loan company. Yeah. But obviously, about 10 years ago, we went through the same thing of people using Wonga to do like their daily purchases and all of that stuff. But the big difference with this is that often, if you adhere to the interest-free period, so if you pay within those 3-4 months, you don't actually pay any more. So in that way, it's kind of hiding the issue. I would say that the kind of main issue is two-pronged. One, a lot of people aren't adhering to the 3 to 4 month interest-free payments. A lot of the time, they're not paying it back. Klarna themselves announced that they offloaded most of its UK buy now, pay later debt to a hedge fund. That shifting of debt has also been the case with PayPal as well. There was up to 40 billion euros of buy now, pay later debt from PayPal was shifted to private equity groups. I don't know if you've seen The Big Short, Ollie. Have you seen The Big Short?
I have.
Great film.
You have. Great film. I would
struggle to explain what happened in it.
Margot Robbie in the bath.
The Big Short was obviously an excellent way of describing what happens in the 2008 global financial crisis. But effectively, it was about bad debt and unsecured loans, but giving people more money than they could afford, particularly with poor credit ratings. Obviously, a lot of this debt is private. It's not public. In 2008, it was mortgages, so it was public debt. But this is private debt. So we're not at that stage yet. But I think what this does show is that the financial markets have not learnt from 2008. They are shifting this debt onto private equity. They're working out new ways of being able to accrue bad debt. And not that we're sleepwalking into another crisis, but I think we are in a situation that we need to be worried.
Well, the slight thing that I didn't understand, and maybe Jamie can shed light on this, is that Klarna is actually not doing very well. I mean, I saw an article in the Financial Times about a couple of weeks ago saying that their net loss had more than doubled in the first quarter because consumers are failing to repay their loans. So about a couple of weeks ago, Klarna reported a net loss of $99 million for the first 3 months up until March. So it's actually very, very risky for fintech like this as well, presumably. And yet it also seems to be a really popular area that companies want to move into.
Yeah, it's a really competitive space. I mean, there was that one company, the US company Affirm, that launched in the UK last year. And there's Klarna, and obviously PayPal's got a 3-part payment plan. And there's various other similar competitors popping up in the space.
The reason that Klarna is launching this physical card is because of this, is because of what Felicity mentions about the losses, is they're basically trying to, I don't want to say legitimize, but they're trying to normalize by using a physical card that people understand mainstream to basically get on more users. The only way that they're going to continue to stay afloat or keep money is to get more users who are able to afford it. And maybe by offering a physical card, you're attracting maybe an older generation of people who understand credit cards but don't understand buy now, pay later. And it is legitimizing it in a way to get a new set of people that maybe are able to pay back the loans better than younger people.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? So I completely understand the fears that this is targeting people potentially who can't afford it, that they're actually going out of their way to find a new group of people who will then get into debt. But Felicity, for everyone else listening to this, I'm hearing the news that there's a new BNPL card, and I'm thinking, that might actually be quite useful to have in my wallet. Like, I manage my money okay. I often take advantage of paying back things in full. If there's the opportunity to pay for something in 3 parts, why not? Like, what's the problem with that? It is a legitimate service, isn't it?
Yeah, this is sort of where I got to with my thinking on this. Yes, it's not a sign of a particularly healthy society. That seems obvious. But is it any different than credit cards, really, which we've always had? And as you alluded to earlier, it's much better than payday loans like Wonga, which really were predatory. I think what it does rely on, which I'm sure we're going to come on to, is the idea that the consumer has to have some basic grasp of budgeting, I suppose has to have some kind of steady income, some financial literacy, that they can, look ahead to the next 3 months, see whether they be able to afford these things.
Harriet.
It also sort of requires people to not know. It actually also relies on people to not have financial literacy, because there's an overwhelming correlation between people who use these buy now, pay later systems and the people with weak credit scores. They are by far and away the most likely people to use them. It's not clear whether systems like Klarna are actively targeting people with low credit scores, or whether it's just that people who have low credit scores are more likely to use them. But it is overwhelmingly, they are the most likely people to use them.
Yeah, and then we've got the danger of a generation of people potentially going into debt over things like getting a pizza on a Friday night. But
yeah, the recent study found that more than 60% of buy now, pay later borrowers had multiple active loans, and nearly 2/3 of them went to borrowers with subprime or deep subprime credit scores.
Okay, so we've had a couple of solutions proposed, Jamie, sort of in this conversation. Regulation, so that companies like the ones Harriet's talking about are clearer in their T's and C's, and financial literacy, so that people understand that what they get into when they take out a loan of any kind. Which is the best one, do you think? I mean, obviously both would be good.
Yeah, so there was actually quite an interesting video, just to touch on that before we go into financial literacy. There was actually an interesting video of a guy in Sweden who talks about the kind of the laws that are in place in Sweden to stop people or companies like this charging a huge amount. And Klarna is obviously a Swedish company, to stop charging massive interest. And I don't think this is something that will ever take place in the UK at the moment, because we obviously have a government that is quite keen on being seen as pro-business. But putting this kind of safety net in place for people who use this would be a way through, a kind of legislation that basically curbs how much debt you can get into. So that is one way. The financial literacy thing is so important. Financial education is part of the secondary school curriculum, but it's taken up in PSHCE lessons. And I remember from my time at school that PSHCE wasn't taken massively seriously by many people, certainly in my school.
That's where they put the sort of odds and ends of things that don't fit elsewhere into the curriculum,
exactly. And a lot of the time it was seen as a way to DOS about, really. So 1% of primary school teachers said that they thought the children that they taught had any kind of financial literacy. So kind of more widespread engagement with children, just about money, basically, at a younger age.
Well, I left university with no clue about anything, about interest rates, about overdraft fees, about credit scores, about anything that I actually really, really needed to know. And those situations, people then make a lot of mistakes in their early 20s especially, that then can come back to haunt them later, like when they're trying to apply for a mortgage, for example. The lack of financial literacy in this country is a direct result of a lack of financial education, because at no point in any of this fancy education was any of this even touched upon.
It's why I genuinely think that when we get rid of the monarchy and we have a republic, Martin Lewis will be president. Like, he's going to be president. He's going to be president for about 50 years. Everyone loves him.
I think we need some constitutional literacy for you, Jamie. Up next, the land of the rising sun goes to the moon. That's after this. Okay, Harriet, your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Everybody made space for Japan.
iSpace,
There it
resilient,
is.
separation confirmed.
Separation confirmed indeed. Successful deployment of the Hakuto R lander. With that, both landers that are on the way to the moon are now successfully deployed, and Falcon 9 did its job successfully.
The sound of resilience being deployed by a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket in January. Harriet, I've read those words. I don't know what they mean. What is resilience and what's happened this week?
Resilience is a lunar lander, so it's a lander designed to land on the moon. And it's this Tokyo-based company, iSpace, launched it last month from Florida. And it's due to touch down on the moon at about 7:30 p.m. UK time tonight in an area north
On
of the
Thursday,
moon.
the day we're recording.
On the day that we're
I
recording.
see.
So by the time this podcast goes live,
It may not be
fingers
underreported
crossed,
news. This may be the big headline.
Fingers crossed, Resilience will have landed in the north of the moon, in this area called Mare Frigoris, which means the Sea of Cold. This company, iSpace, actually attempted something similar 2 years ago, but it ended in a crash landing. So that's why this lander is called Resilience. So this is the latest big moment in this really rapidly intensifying commercial space race. But I thought it's also a good moment to talk about Japan's emergence in the modern space race, which is primarily between the US and China.
Yeah.
So last year, Japan actually became the fifth country after the US, China, Russia, and India to land an unmanned spacecraft on the moon. So it's also a really important partner to NASA as well, which we'll talk about.
All right, but you said it was a private Japanese company. So in
It
that
is a
sense,
private
why is it
company.
different to the private American companies? Why is this Japan rather than just a commercial operation landing on the moon, if you like?
Well, the CEO and founder of iSpace, who's Takeshi Hakamada, he called this moment a stepping stone to the bigger lander that's launching. It's going to be launched by 2027 with NASA involvement. So Japan's space agency has a lot of links with private companies, and private companies have a lot of links with national space agencies such as NASA and such as the European Space Agency. So the space kind of landscape, if you will, in Japan, it's not necessarily a super clear division between the private commercial space and the national government space.
Which I suppose is kind of similar to the USA in that sense, isn't it? You can't really have one without the other.
Just to clarify, the Resilience is hitching a ride on a SpaceX rocket, the Falcon 9, which is obviously, the SpaceX is owned by Elon Musk. And it's going with a European-built rover on it, which is called Tenacious.
Jamie, do you think Japan can compete with China and the US in this space race?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really interesting development, because I think it comes obviously at a time when the Trump administration is slashing the NASA budget. The draft bill that the Trump administration has put forward is...
The Big Beautiful Bill?
The Big Beautiful Bill. Big Beautiful, so beautiful you can see it from space. The draft could cut NASA's budget by about 25% from 2025 levels, halving the funding for its science programs and slashing its workforce by about a third. There's some stuff that you think, yes, actually, this could be cut down and should be cut down, but there is some stuff that seems absolutely mad that they're doing this. One example is the Mars. They were bringing Mars rocks back to kind of understand both how we came to pass, but also how the universe and all of that stuff that actually could be really valuable for us that they're trying to get rid of. So it comes at that time with the Japan stuff there does seem to be a gap in the market for someone to take the place if the Trump bill gets through. I I would be interested to kind of work out, is Japan doing this because they want to put themselves forward as a world power, and particularly in response to China? They've obviously got a massive rivalry with China. Is this a kind of one in the eye for them?
Yeah, it's definitely to do with China versus the US, but it's less to do with competing with either of them. So Japan is not trying to compete because the space race is fundamentally between China and the US. Japan is trying to help the US effectively counter China in that race. Both the US and China are leaning on partner countries really heavily, and private companies, for their space exploration programs. And one of America's biggest assets in this race is that it can lean on Japan, which is really, really advanced in the robotics space, but also India and Europe for now as allies, whereas China can only really count on Russia and some countries in Latin America. There is a wider geopolitical landscape here that is much less to do with Japan trying to beat either of them and much more to do with Japan trying to help make sure that China doesn't win.
Felicity.
Yeah, I think India is another country to watch because in 2023, they made history with their moon mission, the Chandrayaan-3. And that was really interesting because it was actually the first to land in the lunar South Pole region. And they're still the only country to have landed on the South Pole. And that's interesting because the South Pole region, like the surface, it's really, really difficult to get, a very delicate, dinky lander to land on the moon at the best of times. But the South Pole is very uneven. It's full of craters and boulders. But actually, it's a very important location on the moon because sunshine doesn't reach there. So water ice in craters hasn't been blasted by the sun and it's still there. And obviously the sort of renewed interest in the moon of recent decades is all to do really with this water ice that can transform missions for astronauts. It's kind of obvious. And they also did it on a very streamlined budget. So it cost about $75 million, which is pretty cheap, especially when you look at the insanely bloated spendings that NASA's spending on Artemis. So in the past, India had teamed up with Russia, but actually Russia, having been such a dominant superpower in space in the 70s with their lunar landing, they've actually really faded away. And India was going to team up with Russia and then actually thought, you know what, we're just going to go alone because we can.
It's interesting to hear about the politics of all of this. And I understand the significance of being the nation that does whatever first. But just to represent listeners who might be thinking, so what? What does it matter, really? They're all competing with each other, but why? Can someone outline to us why this stuff is important? Are you surprised that there's actually a space race at all, given that we're now in the 2020s, not the 1960s?
Well, some people would say, why the moon anyway? So I think Elon Musk sees it as a massive distraction. He thinks we should be going to Mars. For a long time after the Apollo landings, there was an attitude of we've already done that. We don't need to go there anymore. Everything's changed since Apollo, right? We have better robots and better AI. We don't actually need to send humans to the moon. It does seem more of a bit
But that's exactly what the Artemis program is planning to do. The Artemis program, which is billions and billions of dollars in the making, and it's planning to return humans to the moon for the first time since 1972. I think that they are currently scheduled for next year. That's a NASA program, and Japan is a really important partner in that program. So theoretically, Japan could beat China in that sense to bringing people to the moon. But just in terms of the why of the space race, I think there's three things going on here. Firstly, resources. As Felicity was explaining, the resources on the moon, potentially Mars, but really on the moon is a really big draw for countries because whoever gets control of those resources, it's a massive source of wealth and power. There's also war. NATO has recognized that space is the kind of new frontier of warfare. The US, Russia, France, and other countries all have their own space forces. China and India have tested anti-satellite weapons, so there's war as well. But there's also, it's a question of dominance. It's a geopolitical prestige and allyship. The fact that the US has been leaning on Japan for help in this battle for dominance with China is good for Japan. It's good for diplomacy. It's good for investment. It's good for becoming more of an important ally. Ditto, China is planning to construct a joint research base on the moon with Russia by 2035. So that's really good for Russia as well. So there is advantages to becoming allies in the two big space race powers, which is US and China.
I suppose there's also the kind of branding piece, for want of a better phrase, isn't there, in terms of technology in Japan. When I was growing up in the 1980s in consumer tech, you thought of those Japanese companies, didn't you? Toshiba, Mitsubishi, Panasonic. Whereas now there are cheaper Chinese companies doing the same thing, even in that space. And I guess being involved in any kind of pioneering science with a Japanese brand attached to it is good for brand Japan.
It is. It's good for the money as well. So in 2008, Japan kind of updated its space law to basically make it so that the state is obligated to help private companies in their space exploration programs. So big companies like Toshiba and Mitsubishi that wanted to develop space projects to get in on this global market. And Japan also has this really cool program called the BIRDS Project, which helps non-space countries launch satellites into space. And it's helped Nigeria, Mongolia, Bangladesh, Ghana, Bhutan, Malaysia, Costa Rica, Kenya. This is like their Belt and Roads initiative almost. You know, this is a great source of soft power, great source of money, and a great source. It's attractive. It makes you an attractive partner to the US, which is why the Prime Minister of Japan and the President of the US kind of reaffirmed this big agreement between NASA and Japan not so long ago, just like a few months ago, which is why this proposed decimation of NASA's budget has come as such an unbelievable shock. It's just left everyone reeling.
Yeah, so, okay, you've all sort of mentioned that. So let's just briefly in the last minute on this topic, just cover that then. Jamie, what's going on at NASA?
Yeah, I mean, so as I was saying, they've like the budget is being slashed. It does feel like there's a kind of attack on what they would describe as woke climate change science. It's difficult to know what Congress will do. I saw a poll of Americans from 2 years ago that basically said what they wanted from NASA was to prioritize. Well, one was stopping asteroids from hitting us, which is understandable, but the other one was to prioritize NASA to prioritize help with our climate and climate science and things like that. So if Congress looks at that and sees that that's actually what American people, there is a potential that maybe the legislation could be changed and maybe it won't be such a kind of poorly wielded chainsaw onto the budget. But from my personal perspective, I have that same thing. There's a kind of thread running through all of today's stories about the kind of economic uncertainty that we live in currently. And it's quite depressing. I was just looking up happiness stats in Japan. Japan has now one of the lowest happiness stats among OECD countries. And a lot of that is to do with the economic strain that's on that society. Now, some of this is obviously private. It's not public, but there is a lot of public money in Japan that's going into things like this. And you do have to wonder, when we know that the economy in lots of places is going down the toilet, whether this is how we want to spend our money.
Yeah, having said that, though, in the US context, it's almost the opposite. So with the proposed budget that would slash so much of NASA's funding, that would actually have a colossally poor impact economically on a lot of states, in particular Texas, where a lot of the technology is developed, where a lot of the kind of nuts and bolts of it all are done, and also Florida. So in the sense, the draft proposed budget that the Trump administration has put forward, it would also cancel so many programs that have already cost billions in taxpayer money. So it would be a colossal waste of money in that sense.
And affect their own voters.
And, well, yeah, I mean, as The Economist pointed out, Congress is kind of loves to give out like goodies to its constituents, particularly now in Republican states. And this stuff is good for the economy. But in terms of the direction of NASA in particular, the removal of Jared Isaacman as the nominated pick for NASA leader, because he represents the kind of commercial space race. He's a tech billionaire. He's very close ties to Elon Musk. He represents that commercial, that direction. Some of the names that are being suggested as a replacement are retired army generals, which would suggest a much more militaristic direction for NASA, which a lot of Republicans are really keen on. So it seems that would be more likely to be the direction it's going, particularly now that Elon Musk and Donald Trump appear to have fallen out so spectacularly, and Elon Musk is the biggest representative of the commercial space race.
But also, Felicity, the fact there is a commercial space race, as well as a government-funded one, sort of does indicate that I guess that's where we're going anyway, doesn't it? I mean, this is an example of a Japanese commercial company, and you know, obviously you feel bad for the people working for NASA. It seems crazy, as Jamie was alluding to, that things that are actually like in space at the moment might be cancelled. What was the point? But at the same time, maybe you don't need a big government agency anymore. Maybe it is about collaboration between private and public companies.
I think that's definitely the way forward. And I think it definitely is all about collaboration. I think you're seeing that. You've already seen that with Japan. You've seen that with Blue Ghost earlier this year. I think these space missions will work better, but I think they will also play better into ordinary people's concerns about how much money is being spent on these things. And I just think also there's so much outrage really about how much Artemis is costing, which is just like unjustifiable. I think a lot of people see it as more of a political statement than a scientific one. So I think people will start to turn on these massive space ventures if they just think that's too much public money going up into space.
Okay. Up next, punch-ups in toy shops. Surely humanity has peaked. Find out why after this. Okay, Felicity, you're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This is the week we all went goo-goo for Labubu.
Welcome to Cambridge Pop Mart.
Today I'll be travelling all the way to Cambridge to attend yet another one of Pop Mart's grand openings, hoping to grab some exclusive items, free gifts, and maybe even the newest third generation Labubu. Afterwards, we'll do a little shopping haul and unbox everything together.
Please don't ask me why I'm here at midnight.
Labu what? First in line at Pop Mart Cambridge, a recent video from YouTuber Maria Yu. Felicity, I understand you can tell me both what a Pop Mart is and what a Labubu is and why I should care.
I might not be able to talk about the third one, but I'll have a go. Labubu are it's these tiny little elf-like cuddly toys with mischievous toothy grins and little ears. Think of kind of like a Moomin crossed with an evil Teletubby, and you're kind of there. Labubu is the creation of Ka-Sing Lung. He's an illustrator born in Hong Kong, although he was raised in the Netherlands. And he had a book series called The Monsters, which featured the character of Labubu.
It's a plushie. It's a mini plushie.
Yes.
Based on whole world of characters.
Yes, they've now been turned. They now have little key rings attached to them, and they've just gone crazy. They've just become, it's like a viral moment, and celebrities are pinning them to their very expensive handbags. Lisa from the K-pop band Blackpink is a big fan.
I do know her because I saw The White Lotus.
Yes.
Otherwise I wouldn't.
And other celebs like Rihanna and Dua Lipa. So everyone wants these tiny, creepy little cuddly toys attached to their very expensive handbags.
Okay, and they're made by Pop Mart? What's that?
No, they're Pop Mart. They're sold by Pop Mart. Pop Mart is a Chinese company that sell collectibles, basically. So they don't just sell Labubu, they sell all sorts of different toys and collectibles and all sorts of things.
Is Labubu the official plural, by the way? I'm enjoying that Labubu appears to be
Labubu.
the group noun as well as the singular. Is it? I don't know.
It's
anyway.
like sheep and sheep.
Yeah, I just wonder if the singular should be like Labu-boni. Anyway, carry on.
Labubu.
We digress. But Pop Mart is just like a meteoric rise. So the share price has gone up 500% in a year.
What? 500%?
Yeah, a $38 billion market cap. And it's just because everyone has gone crazy. It's a craze, but it's like a craze on steroids that everyone wants these tiny toys.
Harriet, you're nodding. Tell me that you agree this is a craze and I need to pay attention.
Yeah, I just thought we could just hover on that number a bit. The $38 billion market valuation. That's more than twice the combined value of Mattel and Hasbro, the two US toy giants. Like, this is an extraordinary market valuation.
Wow, so
500%
Barbie's having a moment is
months.
very 2023, obviously.
Oh God, you're so behind.
Yeah.
It's I think that the turning point was in 2019 when the artist kind of did this deal with Pop Mart. But then there's also the wider explosion of the adult toy market during the pandemic, when people began sort of seeking comfort in like childhood nostalgia and sort of comforting plushies or whatever. But yeah, when we were talking about the Blackpink singer, when she shared a photo of herself posing with the Labubu doll last April, then it kind of launched this Gen Z obsession with these little dolls, and they've sort of become a TikTok trend. You can get them in so many sizes and colors and themes, and not just on Pop Mart site or stores, but also in all of these like robo shops, which are like vending machines. There's thousands of these vending machines, but part of the appeal apparently, and I've never actually come across these, but apparently part of the appeal is that they come in these blind boxes. So what's inside is like a secret until you open it.
Oh, right, like football stickers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it drives repeat purchases, because if you want to get a complete collection, you sort of have to keep buying them.
This sounds horribly cynical to me, Felicity, but you obviously are a fan. I can tell just from the big smile on your face.
I'm a fan of the story. I'm fascinated by the story. The actual little toys, I think, are hideous. Like, I think they're really ugly. Which
hideous.
Yeah, which in itself is so interesting, because there's been a lot recently about cuteness and kidult consumerism.
Yes.
And it used to be cuteness that you could understand, a cute little puppy or with big eyes or whatever. But now cuteness has started to, because we're so used to cuteness, we need cuteness with like a little edge to it. And that's why, apparently that's why Labubu dolls are so, people like
But
them.
even
because
that's
they're
not
cute.
new, is it? Like that, Jamie, it's reminded me of the Garbage Pail Kids. Do you remember them? So you had the Cabbage Patch Kids, then you had the Garbage Pail Kids. Literally this. It was like, people are collecting these things, we'll make it,
Yeah,
evil.
I'm looking forward to the film with Labubu in the bath explaining buy now, pay later companies. The thought that came to my mind about all of this is, I don't know if you guys know about the lipstick index. It's kind of been quite discredited, but the idea was that it was coined by Leonard Lauder of Estee Lauder in 2001, and it basically observed that when economic times are tough, lipstick sales rise as people buy kind of little affordable luxuries. One of the ways in which this has kind of gone viral is along the lines of the kind of little treat culture, which is a big one
God, it seems
online.
maybe more cynical. Now it's just really horrible. Like, you can't afford to go on holiday, so buy yourself a plushie.
Yeah, so a recent McKinsey study underscored a kind of generational shift that's occurring. So 59% of Gen Z consumers plan to splurge on little treats like beauty products and snacks in the coming months, compared to only 35% of Gen X and 20% of millennials. And quite a lot of the kind of memes around this are about how people kind of deserve little treats to get through economic hard times. As I was saying earlier, there's obviously a kind of running thread at the moment of how we kind of deal with economic hard times. And Labubu to me seems like as good a way as any to get through. I kind of agree with Felicity. They're pretty ugly, but I do understand that thing of collecting. I collected football stickers, little football mini.
It's like Beanie Babies. They're like sort of monkey looking.
But can
Beanie
I just want to circle back to the point where this is not any of those things. It's not Cabbage Patch. It's not Beanie Babies. It's because this is adults. This is adults collecting it. So I was a huge Tamagotchi fan. I remember the Tamagotchi craze. I actually remember my friend, she gave me her Tamagotchi to look after. I thought the aim of it was to play against the animal. So I basically killed the little puppy on her Tamagotchi by the time she came back from the loo. I must have been the only person on the planet who hadn't understood that the point of Tamagotchi
really
was not to kill it.
Oh
Let's not psychoanalyze.
This is giving me like PTSD style flashbacks of the time I accidentally let my sister's Tamagotchi die. It like haunts me. But the difference as well, apart from the fact that it's adults, the big difference between something like Garbage Pail Kids, did you say?
Cabbage Patch.
My time, that one. Cabbage Patch, whatever. Beanie Babies. The difference is TikTok. So we were talking on the podcast a few weeks ago about the pistachio craze. So the difference is when something now becomes a trend or becomes a craze or becomes popular, before it would spread kind of in a maybe quick way, maybe very quick. But the difference now with TikTok is that something can go viral in seconds and something can go viral worldwide in seconds. Like, that's the big difference now with trends, is the scale that TikTok has enabled. And global supply chains just aren't set up for the speed and scale of that kind of virality.
And it's not good for our planet either, is it?
No, I mean, as we were saying with the pistachio thing, something that's viral is incompatible with sustainable, because the global supply chains are not ready for millions and millions of people wanting something overnight because they've seen one person from one band have it on their bag. Like, that, no supply chains were set up for TikTok. So that is the big difference now. This is a trend, but it's kind of a turbocharged trend.
And also, the shops aren't stocking them at the moment, I understand, Felicity. Like, if you want one, you can't get one anyway.
Yes, so Pop Mart has had to, I think it was last week, has had to remove the lines from its shops because it was causing such a fuss. So in Westfield, Stratford, like a mass brawl erupted. People were actually physically fighting to get their hands on these things. A Labubu brawl, which is really dark, like, and really
surely
and kind of
it's Labuha.
But didn't people used to do that with Juicy Tubes? Do you guys remember that?
Juicy Tubes?
No, the lip glosses, Juicy Tubes. Weren't there fights?
How dare you say you don't know what a garbage pail kid is and then bring me Juicy Tubes?
Well, I don't know what either of. I sort of vaguely remember there would be people fighting over that
but
stuff.
Did they? Sorry, Felicity. Did they remove them because of the fighting, or did they remove it as a way of like trying to drive up sales?
Well, that's the thing. I think it is a cynical ploy that there's no way that they can't have done this, partly because it has just made people want them so much more. Like,
okay, look, this is essentially a light-hearted conversation. I get that, where we are in the cadence of the show. But I just want to say, Felicity, on this, again, on your beat, talking to kids all the time, is this encouraging gambling, this blind box element? Because with football cards, at least it's £2, but these are, I mean, how much do they cost? They're like a tenner or something?
They start from £13.50 and they go
£13.50.
And
I know you're saying they're for
inflation.
adults. I know. And I know you're saying they're for adults, but there are obviously at least preteens who'd be into this, right?
To some extent, I do think what's most remarkable about the story is that it is actually for adults. I don't think this is a children's story necessarily. Collectibles, sure, have always been around and have interested kids, and it's always been a very clever marketing ploy because you want to get the whole set and you're going to keep spending until you get it. But I do think
you don't know what you're going to get in this instance. You do not know whether you're going to get the one you want.
Well, it's so brilliant in a world of instant gratification where you can have, especially with Klarna on the scene, you can have whatever you want whenever you want. The fact is that they come in hidden boxes. You don't know what, you can't just say, I want the really rare chestnut one. You might get the ugly pink one. People find that absolutely fascinating that they can't just have it. And now that Pop Mart's removed them from the shelves as well, and they're sold out, and there's now a whole a counterfeit market that's grown up, Lafufu, around them. But I do think there is something much darker to this craze that you haven't seen with previous crazes, because it's going to adults, because it seems to be pointing to some sort of societal anxiety. I think you can liken it to fur babies, people having pet dogs or little cute cuddly things, rather than actually having kids. That's been discussed a lot. Rather than having the stress and the mess and the expense of children, why not get something cute and furry to look after? There is something that seems darker to this craze than previous crazes.
But there's also the crucial thing, I think, about what we were talking about in terms of the virality of it, because at the same time, I mean, I think Pokemon cards, as far as I remember it, you would buy a packet and not know which ones you would get in it, so you would have to buy multiple ones. I remember that sort of vaguely from my childhood. But the key to the success, which we were saying, is the viral nature of TikTok and how fast and how big something can get, is also the key to its downfall. Because now, if everyone's got them and you've sort of seen them on hundreds of videos on your For You page, and you've seen them dangling from the bags of hundreds of celebrities and A-listers, their moment, that flash in the pan viral popularity or fame, will be over much faster. I think people will be on to the next thing before you know it.
Jamie, have you ever queued in line for anything?
I was thinking about this because I was looking at the. Sadly, I don't think I have. I think the closest I got was the Harry Potter book launches.
Oh yeah,
obviously
yeah. What, 15? Scar on your head?
Yeah, a little. Yeah. Kind of. I didn't really look like any of them. That was the problem. If I wore my hair down
Ron,
a bit, I'd look like. Yeah. Well, I look like Hermione if you put your hair.
I was actually dressed as Harry Potter once to film a video in Oxford, like a comic sketch, and there were definitely tourists there who thought I was Daniel Radcliffe. Anyway, I am off to buy some Juicy Tubes. See you next week, all of you. Thank you, Felicity, Jamie, Harriet. You can follow this show for free. You can get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts, and then tap follow. You can also get 6 free issues of The Week magazine with a trial subscription if you go to theweek.com/subscriptions. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Ollie Peart at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.